So look, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on optimising your success in the digital economy and how to become digital plus. Before we get into the presentation, I'd like to firstly acknowledge the First Nation Australians with a welcome to country. In spirit of reconciliation, Be Nimble acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. So with that, our speakers today are Peter Grant and Keith Ross Carroll and myself, Miranda McLaren, and we're all from Be Nimble. We're a company that sets organisations up to be digital plus in the digital economy. As we mentioned already, this presentation today is being recorded, and at the end of the session today, we will send you a copy of that recording and a copy of the deck that we're going to use to take you through. So Peter, why do we care about Digital Plus?
Well, have a look at this, this diagram. We've got music, travel, news, TV, recruitment, education, you name it. The list of industries impacted by digital disruption just goes on and on and on. So if you're sitting in a board meeting and someone says, we need to know about digital disruption, you've really got to think about what do they really mean? And even worse, who do you go to for advice? So do you go to someone who knows technology? Because we would say, maybe not. Maybe that's not the right thing to do. Every organisation on the planet is under the pump to respond to an evolving digital economy. And it's going to be nearly impossible to get ahead of it. Competitors will continue to emerge from all sorts of places, even outside our own industries. And new technologies are coming on the scene that potentially make our products and services better, but some may make them worse. So how do boards and chief executives ever keep up with this? One approach is to have a digital person on the board or a smart ICT person on the board. We don't advise along these lines. We don't think this works. We don't use the term digital. You would have heard Amanda use the term digital plus, and we do that on purpose because digital disruption is about a whole range of new business capabilities and technologies. Wheeling in a technical person isn't going to address this. And what if the board's technical expert provides the wrong advice and the company embark on a failed initiative? Other board members who don't have those expertise won't be in a position to even validate that advice. So what if the technical expert doesn't recognise a serious competitor until it's too late? You know, the outcome of this in a lot of cases is that everyone on the board loses their house. At Be Nimble, we've identified 5 foundations that underpin an organisation's digital capabilities. 2 of them are external, that's awareness and engagement, and 3 of them are internal, agility, implementation and governance. Awareness is how well do you know your business ecosystem? Are you monitoring emerging technology enablers? What we're looking for in organisations is proactivity. They're looking to keep up to date on purpose. They've funded people into positions to actually do this job. Engagement is about how well do you connect with your customers, suppliers, supply chain partners and your staff. Digital enablers enables great connections and support for long-term relationship building. So how's your business going there? Are we using our digital capabilities to do that? And then there's 3 internal capabilities. Implementation. This is simple enough. Can you implement new ideas with confidence? Can you take on complex system implementations and know they will work? We'll talk a little bit about that later because plenty don't work. The next one is agility. How agile is your organisation? And the key question we ask everybody there is, do your legacy ICT systems hold you back? The answer from almost everyone is yes. And finally, governance. How well does your organisation manage all of these, what are effectively new business dimensions? We'll look at where organisations do this well and where they don't. So over to you, Miranda. Tell us more about the 5 foundations.
Yeah, absolutely. So within each of these 5 foundations, there are multiple dimensions of organisational capability that underpin that foundation. Now, this is a busy slide, so please don't get lost in the busyness of it. And there's kind of 2 key messages here. The first is that to truly enable your organisation for success in this ever-evolving digital economy, every single one of these dimensions needs to be both understood and your maturity in that dimension honestly assessed. The second key thing here is that each of these dimensions are interrelated and they're dependent on each other. And if you have a weakness in one, it will affect your ability to execute in others. And without understanding all of these dimensions and how you're performing within them, you may not be able to determine exactly where that impact is coming from. During the course of this presentation, we'll show you how, as a board member or an executive, how you can use this model to help you make good investment decisions. So let's start by looking at the external influences we need to be aware of when looking to compete in the digital economy. So Peter, can you talk to us about the importance of being aware?
Yeah, so let's talk about awareness. If the world is changing around you, then you'd better know what's going on. That seems simple enough, but most organisations really don't do this well. There's some fine examples of awareness failures that we can draw, where market leaders have lost massive ground to competitors or disappeared altogether. It's easy to spot them. Blockbuster Video in the USA, a $300 million company in 2009, was bankrupt by 2012, and they were run out of town by a little startup called Netflix. The music industry, the taxi industry, the hotel industry are all examples where market leaders lost ground to new entrants. And they did it without a fight. They just gave up. Why? Because these organisations didn't see these new competitors coming. The taxi industry had 8 years to notice Uber and still did nothing. So what do we need to do? There's 2 key steps here. Step 1 is we need to have people in our organisation whose job it is to do environmental scanning. They should be looking at emerging competitors and evaluating emerging technologies. These are absolutely essential activities in every organisation in 2021, and I would include government in that. These people are the sentries on the wall to make sure that we are heading in the right direction. Now, even when they have a go at this, organisations still get this wrong. So many times we see that there's people set up in these roles and they kind of run it as a hobby with minimal funding and just 0 executive support. They might identify things that need to be acted on, but there's no way to connect this advice to executive decision makers and to the board. Step 2 is we need to ensure these awareness efforts are well funded and aligned to the business, and critically linked to the executives and the board through a decent governance process. It goes without saying, advice must be taken seriously. What could seem like a really out there competitor today, Netflix probably to Blockbuster Video, is going to be the market leader tomorrow. So what does good look like in this space? We've got a couple of examples. One is Atlassian. The internal team at Atlassian use a concept called Ship It for their innovation cycle. It's a structured, top-down, bottom-up initiative that runs as a core business activity. Once a month, they shut the whole company down and everyone contributes to an innovation activity. Critically, there will be a team of people whose job it is to coordinate this. And those people are responsible for making sure Atlassian has an awareness capability that's working. And if we have a look at Amazon, they're an example of an organisation that leverages new technologies better than almost any other business. And even as far back as 15 years ago, Amazon were using artificial intelligence even when you were buying books. If you bought one book, they'd say, well, people who bought that book also bought this one, so why don't you consider buying 2 books? That's a long time ago that they were using artificial intelligence to improve their sales. So we have two examples here. We have the Shipit example, where we're actually investing in market awareness, and we have the Amazon example where they're leveraging new technologies to their benefit. Now, let me say that not every organisation does this well, and we have lots of customers we work with in the space. And we've had a customer in the last 12 months, and they're spending a lot of time and money and effort and work on awareness type activities. They're a traditional business and they're being disrupted by a highly competitive international player. But their awareness activities are all bespoke, they're all silo driven, they create a lot of duplication, and they're not connected to the executive decision-making part of the organisation. So people come up with good ideas and they don't go anywhere. This is common. Most organisations don't do awareness well, and it is a critical external foundation required to operate in a digital plus world. So Miranda, tell us about the other external foundation, which is engagement.
Great, thanks Peter. So when we talk about engagement, we mean how well an organisation interacts with its entire ecosystem, creating those exceptional experiences that engender brand loyal ambassadors. This ecosystem, it consists of staff, customers, suppliers, partners, industry, collaborators, and even in some instances, your competitors. Essentially anyone or any business that you're interacting with in the everyday running of your organisation. And the quality of this engagement will impact your brand. It will impact how loyal that ecosystem is with you. And it will impact the trust that you engender and that people have with you. And ultimately, that affects your bottom line. Ubiquitous access to products and services anyone at any time has made doing engagement well even more important for organisations. In a recent study I read, it was found that 51% of smartphone users purchased from a company other than they had originally intended because of the information that they got from a competitor in that moment that they needed it. So that's over half of your potential buyers are being lost in seconds because of the way that you are engaging with them. So it used to be that we would buy a better product, but now we buy from a place that's easier to buy from, in the way that you want to buy it, in the time that you want to buy it. And so as a consumer today, we are really defining that experience for organisations and wanting to have it as our own. One that just happened to us just recently was with Bank Australia. I so wanted to be their customer. I love what they stand for. But when we recently tried to open a bank account with them, it just was too hard. So there was 3 of us involved. And what we had to do was we had to print paper. We had to physically sign that paper. We had to get those papers to each other. We had to countersign them. Then we had to get them back in one spot. And then we had to put them in the mail via Australia Post and send them down to Melbourne. This was in the middle of COVID and that phenomenal LGA experience that some of us have just been through. So what they offered was already like a difficult and painful process, but in those circumstances, it made it impossible for us to become their customer. So the alternative that we went with, the account was set up within 15 minutes. We completed it online, and I personally didn't have to leave my COVID-safe desk. So as I said before, when we talk about engagement, it's not just about customers. It's also about creating these exceptional experiences for everyone that you interact with, your partners, your suppliers, your employees. But underpinning this is your ability to do this is trust. Online engagement has complicated this as it demands an additional layer of organisational responsibility for keeping that interaction, that engagement, safe and secure. In fact, we see security as the critical dimension in engagement foundation. Not getting this right can undermine all of your efforts that you've made in other areas. Security and privacy needs to have organisational awareness and respect to the importance of keeping your ecosystem information safe. This needs to embrace not only the regulatory requirements, the things that we need to tick as an organisation, but there's a moral obligation that we need to have as being custodians of this information. So we've just covered the external. Keith, if we can just go on to the next slide. Oh, no, sorry. Back, sorry, my mistake. So we've just covered all of the external drivers, but what do you need to understand about your organisation internally? You know, what do you need to know about how you run your organisation and how well you can deliver in the digital plus economy? So Keith, can you talk to us about the foundation of agility and what we need to understand there to be able to execute well?
Most certainly, Miranda, and thanks for that. So when we talk about agility, we talk about the capability for an organization to ultimately respond, change, and shift quickly to competitive moves and market demands. Now, why this is so important, at the end of the day, organizations will need to rapidly innovate. The opportunity to leverage new technologies as they become available is become almost the new currency. And having confidence in the quality of those digital platforms and tools is just as important. But obviously being able to respond to that market shift, competitive disruptions in line with your organizational strategy is absolutely key. And it's unfortunate, but we see that broken in a lot of organizations. Great moves at departmental level, board has great ideas, just can't execute. Right. So, and what we see it manifests a number of ways. Most importantly, just that prevention from being able to achieve that competitive backlog as it occurs, and it gets to a certain point, and then the organization starts to lose relevance. Once that relevance curve unfortunately goes away from your business, it's really hard to get it back, right? And you can take years just to get back to a competitive situation. Meanwhile, the market's moved on. So in terms of what we see people doing wrong, you know, the obvious ones, people spending far too much time on keeping the lights on, but not focusing on the quality of the services that they're missing opportunities, especially in that competitive space, and probably losing competitive advantage as a result. Delays in delivering new initiatives, and we'll touch on that more so in implementation, but the platform regularly holds organizations back. Now, new initiatives generally necessitate changes to the technical environment, what we call common platforms. So think middleware, think messaging platforms. All those things need to be updated to make a new initiative potentially viable. And of course, if the environment's unstable or unreliable, then any change is going to face increased risks, longer lead times, high costs. And the unfortunate reality, as I mentioned before, is fixing this just may well be too late. Let alone the fact that you've got a poor quality business operating environment. It's not high for on morale, and it causes damage in terms of employee places and certainly choices of work, and ultimately then will hit revenue. So what looks good in the agility space? Well, I guess fixing a lot of the issues that just aforementioned. But let's focus in on an organization. Now, if we were to talk about, say, Xero, a New Zealand organization, externally, 3+ million subscribers now, 300 new subscribers in the last half year. Got to ask the question, whose lunch have they stolen? All right, they're an international player. They're creaming it in Canada. They're doing very well in the US. And they're doing that as a result of a SaaS deployment out of Wellington, New Zealand. But just as importantly, internally, their use of SaaS is prolific. They're using Salesforce in terms of the entire CRM suite, Office 365, AWS hosting and DevOps, HubSpot marketing automation. And as a result of that, their legacy doesn't exist. So they don't have common infrastructure issues. They've defined their platform and they're running with it. Kind of fortunate that they're able to reinvent themselves in place to be competitive with the large platforms such as QuickBooks or Sage. But their entire environment operates anywhere, scales to demand. So, and anyway, with that, agility is great, but it's only as good as your capability to implement. Well, isn't that right, Pete?
That's right, mate. So implementation. It's a fair bet.
Peter.
It's a fair bet. In implementation, it's a fair bet. You're right, Keith?
Oh, sorry, if I haven't brought you back. Sorry, Peter.
Yep.
Wrong way.
Okay, in implementation, it's a fair bet that competitive pressures and emerging technologies will enforce changes in the way you do your business. And your people will have good ideas too, and there'll be things that need to be implemented. So how are most organisations prepared for digital plus implementation? The stats say not too well. So if we have a look at these stats from Gartner, the results aren't good. The light blue on the bottom, they are talking about where people had an initiative and they weren't delivered the functionality they asked for. I'd like to have a new car, please, and someone's given me an apple. It's not going to work particularly well. The next level in the dark blue was where their initiatives were substantially late. And we're doing this generally to respond to competitive pressures. We don't need our projects to be substantially late. And in the green, then in that layer there, the projects were vastly over budget. Didn't get what I wanted, substantially late, vastly over budget. So let's talk about why this happens. Why do these things go wrong? Now, the first point I'd suggest there is that most organisations fail to choose the right objective. Now, that's going to sound crazy, but this happens because if you go back to the previous slide as an example, people in there basically are not getting the functionality they asked for. So 20% plus aren't getting the functionality they asked for. And to get this right, organisations have to be good at business case development. And that just doesn't happen. This requires solution architects and business analysts and governance processes. Most organisations are understaffed in every one of these areas. They're not great at business case development, and it's the beginning of the end for initiatives. Let me say that there's a kind of a reason for that quite a lot of organisations, if they don't know any better, they just allocate the shiny bits. I need to have a project manager and that project will be fine. But that's not enough. You need more than that. The next area is one that we find so common, and that is that most organisations think that running projects is a temporary capability, and so they only need temporary staff in it as well. So change managers, project managers, schedulers are only brought on board when people have a project to do and then they're let go. Now, this is just crazy behaviour. Most organisations have a 5-year plus project backlog. A lot of them don't know it, but that backlog is there. And having people in temporary roles means that to start a project, I'll do that with key people who don't understand my business intimately because they've just joined, and they won't have relationships with key people and with my key stakeholders. And organisations are doing this on purpose. If we go to the third reason, and that is generally there's either an absence of a program management office or the program management office is under-resourced. We need to have a program management office to set standards, to coordinate prerequisites and priorities, to support resourcing, to build corporate knowledge. If we only hire temporary people, they walk out the door with all of our learnings, and to coach people in project governance. And this last bit's quite important because one of the things we see is that quite a lot of business executives don't know how to attend a governance meeting or a steering committee meeting that is a Digital Plus meeting. And finally, we need engaged corporate players, because in the Digital Plus world, finance and procurement play a different role. Digital technologies have different financing models, and require different approaches to procurement, especially sandboxing. So if you're a board member or a CEO, has your organisation got all these ducks in a row? In our experience, if they haven't, then any Digital Plus initiative they kick off is probably going to fail. You may be asking, as a board member or a CEO, taking on an organisation that doesn't have these under control, you may be asking them to join the failed project status on the previous page. Now, your first line of defence against this problem is knowledge of your organisation's capabilities and a strong executive interest and engagement to ensure these capabilities stay in place. But Miranda said earlier, knowledge and understanding of these foundations, that's critical. We've left a list of these in the slides because we think these are so critical. If organisations just haven't got these right, they're going to be in trouble. And now let me move on to the final foundation. So Keith, tell us how we pull all this together under a new governance paradigm for Digital Plus.
Yeah, well, look, we talk about governance. You know, the first reaction I have, I can't speak for everyone else, is it sounds boring, it sounds mechanical. But, you know, here's the capability in defining how well an organisation can manage your action times and the necessary compliance required to operate successfully in your organisation. And now you ask the question, well, why is this important? Why does it matter? And why should everyone be so sensitive to this? And well, at the end of the day, it should be a competitive differentiator. You should be able to work quicker to your organisation to make decision, to collate competitive issues and to turn that around, to promote other initiatives within the organisation. And now, if it can't get from the board, from executive leadership, from the right layers within your organisation, down to an approved execution, using the right business case elements, using the right approach, your organization's in trouble. Okay, so, and we see with Digital Plus, it requires a complete revamp of the governance, compliance, and risk management processes as a result. They need to be tailored for the new set of challenges. I mean, SaaS, consumption, co-creation, all have different risk and commercial models. I don't know how many times I've been to a government organization saying, we want SaaS, we want it under a consumption, and then you get to the contract stage, oh, we'll buy that CapEx, but could you push it out 5 years and make it look like a consumption model, because I need to tick a box, right? So there's so much opportunity for organizations to get that right. And if you look at what organizations don't get quite right in this space, it's the quality, extent, and the adoption of the governance framework. They're just seen as an inhibitor, so people try to work around them as best they possibly can. Evaluation of risk. You know, risk can be done quite poorly in organizations. Unfortunately, they'll see it as a necessary, again, tick a box or cover one's behind, but don't use it to advantage. And even understand the difference of different segments within risk. Understanding, are you talking about brand or corporate risk in direct contrast to the appreciation of operational or project risk? Now, are decision makers well informed? Are they working at the appropriate level in the organization for decision making? Now, regularly, this is disjointed. Every organization, anyone that, I mean, there's a few vendors on the call here, and you'll go in and to establish the decision-making framework in an organization. It's not straightforward. Internally, they're regularly challenged to understand that. Got to ask, does your governance delay initiatives? Hey, do people even know what the governance processes are? Are they of the opinion that the governance is causing delays? Because if it does, if they're as good as the mettle of the people on this call, they'll find a way around it, right? And the other question to have to ask is, given that these changes are so, if you like, integral to your business decision and execution, are you reviewing this constantly enough to make sure you're up to date with the world around you? So, without going into the detail of what governance looks like, I mean, most of us are aware of it. Quite simply, if it's not in place, you should be doing it, right? It's the glue that connects your decision making to execution. It really is a differentiator in business. And it's going to determine how quickly you can respond to competitive market pressures, identified initiatives within an organization, and actually move to action, right? So, you know, if you look at the need to streamline, another one I think that
We lost Keith.
We lost him. And he was about to tell us the other one he thought was important.
Yeah. You know, it's, oh, have I lost you?
We've just come back. Another one that is important.
Oh, it must have been important. If I restate, I apologize, but measure your reaction and response times. Organizations don't, and they wonder why it takes 5, 6, 12 months to get a project up. Agendas will have these things been kicked in the touch, left around the water cooler to discuss, 10, 20 times, when really your organization should be disciplined enough to get it to a decision and execute accordingly. So anyway, with that, over to you, Miranda, to wrap up.
Great, thank you. So just before I do, we do have a question, and I would just invite everyone else, if they have any questions. We're just a small forum, so feel free to pop off mute and ask us online here. But we had a question already, which was, can an existing business, whose business is an ongoing and successful one, to a certain extent, really disrupt their own business and begin to implement a better model? And how do you get that business to think differently?
Yeah, look, happy to take that. Or do you want to take that one, Peter?
I'll have a crack after you, mate. I think you go first.
Oh, look, for starters, I would argue most businesses don't have a choice. They're running in a 2-speed economy with their traditional bricks and mortar, dare I say, competitors trying to be more efficient, trying to sell more, trying to investigate different segments and penetrate each other's market. And at the same time, they're disruptors. There are disruptors that can come in and take a very small market segment and either take the cost base through the floor, make an insane business case to make it far more compelling than a brick and mortar can do. So in short, there's many other reasons. I think they've got to be operating at both levels, and to do that, they need to be at least operating internally to disrupt all these areas that we've spoken about amongst these foundations. If an example is if they have a big cumbersome manufacturing process that they can't reinvent a better way of either doing niche based manufacturing or incremental manufacturing at scale. It's been answered so many different ways in the world, whether it's global sourcing or if it's subcontracting and the like. If you can't bring that in-house and get that right when other players can do so and fundamentally change that business, you're going to be in constant trouble. But again, you're not agile internally. You can't make those decisions. You can't compartmentalize it in that business. Yeah, you're going to have problems. You've got certain business agendas that are going to be conflicting. The short-term, medium, and long-term views. You're going to have the guys putting up their hands saying, I want to be in the new business segments. I want different cost base to those guys over there. I should be taking less recoveries. All of those discussions have to come to the fray. So with that in mind, I think the answer is absolutely, and it's key fact to a lot of the work we're doing.
Just let me follow up, Keith, Jeff, and we'll let you have a crack. To follow up that question, we're consultants, and so if we go into an organisation and say you need to transform your business, they're never going to believe us. The first bit of feedback they'll give us will be, oh, well, you've only been here 5 minutes and you don't understand it well enough. But we're looking at the planet, and everyone is doing it. But my recommendation for getting organisations to change is, first of all, to set up the right tools in the organisation so they can figure out that they need to change themselves. So when we talk about having an awareness function, an awareness foundation, we're saying set up a group of people who'll work inside the organisation to tell you how you're going in terms of changing, and they will tell you that you need to change your own business, and then it's not us as blow-in consultants who are doing it. And I've got a case study for you. Who's one of the better ones I can think of. So a few years ago, under their previous CEO, Microsoft shares were around $120 a share, and they were selling Office products on a CD. And you bought Microsoft Office and you popped it on your computer yourself. Microsoft worked out that software as a service and cloud was the way to go, and they sold that on a subscription model. Now, when you bought Office on a CD, it was $1,000. When you bought it on a subscription model that first year, it was only $120. So all of a sudden, that was a huge hit to revenue for them. But what's their share value today? It's not $120 anymore. It's $330 a share. So they might have seen themselves as a successful business at $120 a share. Innovation got them to $320 a share. So it's about getting the organisation to tell themselves that they need to change. We've got Jeff Miranda who's got a question.
Yeah.
No, just an observation. I totally agree with Keith's comment that businesses don't have a choice. But my question was more about how do you get the business to either disrupt themselves, change the paradigm shift, or begin to think differently? Is that a tops down, get the CEO to mandate it? Do you begin to work at the level of the bottom of the organization to try and request different processes? Or do you work with a staff function that begins to create a totally different model? So it's really a focus on the word, how do you get these businesses to change?
So who are we giving that to?
You know me, I'm happy. Everyone knows I'm happy to talk forever in a day. I mean, that change spark, Jeff, is that first part of the how. And you know, the short answer is, and you know, you've done it both ways. You've seen it work. You need to find where that's coming from based on how the organization, in my opinion at least, how the organization works, and possibly how they need to work, right? So building the why in the organization, I would believe is key. So in terms of my how, as to how to start that effect of change in the organization, is to raise that awareness to the point where the board, CEO, senior leadership is actually seeing that pain or seeing that opportunity, and then get to that stage of, okay, that's great, Keith, but now how do we execute this? Now there's multiple ways to go. There is sandboxing. You know, if you look at the Cisco methodology, what they'll do is they'll go so far as to create a JV or even another organization and let that organization run completely independently, and then they'll reintegrate them. Others need to consider if they want to do it in-house and reinvent in-house, the kind of concessions that are required to spark that kind of business. But you're right. You know, it's not just top down. It's got to be bottom up. People are going to be doing this. If it was a manufacturing organization, someone's got to change on the floor. You've either got to compartmentalize or integrate it into your business. I consider it a huge risk to start integration early if you're investigating a viability of a business model. My usual recommendation is to start it separately, compartmentalize it where you can. So you can look at different things such as different financial considerations. I mean, it's an investment, right? So not only people, process, new technologies needed to make that work, but you've also got your key business model KPIs to measure. And the last thing you want to do is have a legacy business getting in the way of all that, compromising it or challenging it as a model. So that incubation method is absolutely key. an answer. I could go on for a long time on this one, Jeff. You know, we've kind of both done this in large organizations, but my thought is compartmentalization, hit points, stages where they achieve or don't achieve the required outcomes, and kind of run it like a business project. You know, so there'll be kill points, there'll be opportunities to reinvent or even change the goals, do what you or of course realize success. And then from there, how do you integrate? But you know, you're going to need every layer of the business to be part of that execution at some stage.
I like your suggestion of a sandbox. That's a relatively low risk way to get in and let the organization see it. But as you know, there are many organizations and many people who are protecting the status quo, who move my cheese, and fear of change is a reality in the business today. And so coming up with other options in addition to the sandbox approach are really critical to an organization embracing what is a new paradigm shift in their industry. If they don't do it, somebody else will, and then they'll be marginalized.
I've got to say that's absolutely the case. One of my great frustrations in this industry at the moment is people who say that they're experts at digital disruption, but then don't understand about that marginalisation. I've been doing this since the 1980s. I've taken digital to hotels and airline industries and government, and I know that there are winners and losers every time this happens. It's one of the reasons we say in implementation that we need permanent people in the organisation to manage the changes, because there's going to be significant ones there. In our job, we make lots of friends and lots of enemies, I guess, because we show organisations how they can be different, and there's always people who are impacted by that in a way that they don't like. But in the end of the day, the organisation doesn't keep up with its competition. It's a blockbuster video. It's not going to be there. And so there is, although we're going to be compassionate to people who have their expectations and their roles changed, in the end of the day, we have to be respectful that we've got to keep the business going, and we've got to provide advice that goes along those lines. I did notice, Keith, that George wants to join the meeting as well.
I've got a peacock. I can UPS him over to you, Jeff. I'll have him in California in about 2 days. You're going to love him.
Don't go there, Jeff.
Yeah, another question, Jeff.
No, I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all.
We should be saying thank you to you.
Any other questions from anyone else in the group?
I think we have a chat message there.
There's a few in the chat. I don't know if they're
no, they're all
okay.
Yeah, all good.
Thanks. Okay, Jeff's question. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And it is a really important question with no single answer. It is instilling a mindset change within an organisation, making sure that they are, that they choose, that it becomes a choice that needs to be made. So just to wrap up. We believe that having a deep understanding of immaturity in each of these foundations is critical for organisations today to understand how well they're going to be able to respond to the digital economy. If you're not aware of what's happening in your marketplace, then how do you know what your organisation needs to develop or adapt to? If you don't know how your ecosystem wants to engage with you, then how do you know what they're going to value in receiving from you? Without understanding the limitations of your existing systems and infrastructure, how can you plan for their migration and amplify your agility? And without answers to these questions, sorry, that's my dog, Without answers to these questions, how do you ensure that the decisions that you're making about implementing or responding to digital initiatives are actually sound, that this new capability is going to add value to your organisation, that you're going to be able to implement it well, and that the full benefits are realised and actualised for your organisation? We work with organisations to help them understand their maturity in each of these foundations so as to be able to answer these questions with confidence and to be able to continue to succeed in this ever-evolving digital economy. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. If you would like to learn more about our 5 Foundation Maturity Assessment, please let us know. We would love to share more with you and share with you how we're helping other organisations do this well. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. As I said earlier, we will be sending you a copy of the deck and a recording of this presentation after the webinar today. And again, thank you for joining us.